Welcome back to the deep dive. We're continuing our journey through the MPP, the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, section by section.
Trying to really get into the nuts and bolts, right?
Exactly. Today, we're diving into Chapter 1800. That's all about the Patent Cooperation Treaty, the PCT.
Big chapter.
And specifically, we're zeroing in on Section 1840, the International Searching Authority.
The ISA, a really key player in the PCT system.
That's the plan. We want to unpack this section, figure out what the ISA does, and, why it matters if you're dealing with international patent applications.
And we're sticking just to the source materials provided for this section, digging into what the MPE excerpts tell us.
Right. And before we properly jump in, a huge thank you to Mike Shepard. He's the creative director behind this whole audio series.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't do it without him.
And really important note up front, everyone. The summary material we're working from, it was put together using AI tools.
Which is helpful, but it means, there could be errors, maybe things left out.
Precisely. So think of this as general information, educational context. It's definitely not legal advice.
No, absolutely not. And it's no substitute for proper training either.
For the official word, you always need to go to the actual MPP or, talk to a qualified instructor or a registered patent practitioner.
Couldn't agree more. Always check the source or get expert advice.
Okay, so with that covered, let's get into it. The International Searching Authority, the ISA, what exactly is its role in this whole PCT picture?
Well, think of the ISA as maybe the first big hurdle or checkpoint in the PCT process. When you file that international application, someone needs to do a really thorough search for prior art.
Okay.
And that's the ISA's main job. It's an entity, or usually a national patent office, that's specifically designated under the PCT to perform this search.
And the USPTO, the U.S. Patent Office, can be one of these.
Yes, exactly. The USPTO is one of these designated authorities. When it acts as an ISA, it's called the ISIS.
ISIS.
And its authority comes directly from U.S. law and the PCT regulations. The sources mentioned 35 U.S.C. Section 362 and 37 CFR 1.413. Basically, the PCT Assembly appoints them.
Interesting.
And just as a side note, USPTO can also act as an international preliminary examining authority later on in IPEA, but today we're focused just on that initial searching role.
Okay, so the ISA does the initial search. What specific tasks are on their checklist? It sounds like it might be more than just, plugging keywords into a database.
Oh, definitely more involved.
Yeah.
Based on the MPP excerpts, their key duties really break down into a few areas.
Like what?
First, obviously, conducting the actual searches. This covers the main international search for the PCT application, but also something called international type searches.
International type searches?
Yeah, those are basically searches done on national applications, but using the same kind of standards and scope as a full international search.
Okay, what else?
Second, they prepare the official International Search Report, the ISR. This lists all the relevant prior art documents they uncovered.
The ISR.
Third, and this is a big one, they evaluate unity of invention. They look at your claims and decide if you're really focused on a single invention or if you've actually claimed multiple distinct inventions in one application.
Ah, unity. That sounds important.
It is. And fourth, something that's been mandatory since January 1st, 2004, they have to issue a written opinion.
A written opinion on
the potential patentability of the claims in your application based on the prior art they found in their search. It's like an initial assessment.
Wow, okay, so search, report, unity check, and an opinion.
Exactly. And once they've done all that, the ISA sends the search report and that written opinion both to you, the applicant, and to the International Bureau of the IB.
So that information gets out there pretty early in the game.
Yes, it does, which is a key feature of the PCT system.
That makes sense. Search, report, opinion, unity check. Let's try to make this more concrete. Can you walk through an example? Say I file a PCT application. How does the ISA actually handle it?
Good idea.
Okay,
let's imagine you file your PCT application and you use the USPTO as your receiving office.
Right.
A special copy of your application, called the search copy, gets sent to the ISA that you've selected.
Okay, I select the ISA. We'll come back to that.
Yes, you often have a choice. So this IS, let's say it's the ISIS for this example, but it could be another one, takes your search copy and starts digging. They search patent databases, scientific journals, other relevant publications, looking for prior art related to your claimed invention.
Right, the standard prior art search.
Exactly. Based on what they find, they compile that international search report listing the relevant documents, and alongside that, they write up the written opinion.
Giving their initial take on patentability.
Precisely. Their view on whether your claims seem novel, inventive, and industrially applicable, considering the art they found.
Okay. Now, you mentioned unity of invention earlier. How does that fit into this example?
Right. So during their review, if the ISA examiner thinks, this application seems to cover 2, maybe 3 different inventions that aren't really linked by one single inventive concept.
They don't share that core idea.
Exactly. They're seen as independent or distinct. If that happens, the ISA issues what's called a Notice of Lack of Unity of Invention.
Okay, a specific notice.
And that notice essentially says, look, we found multiple inventions here. We searched the first one we identified. If you want the other searched during this international phase, you need to pay an additional search fee.
Additional fees. Knew that was coming.
Per additional invention they identify.
Right. So that brings us back to choosing an ISA and the costs. You said applicants might have options. What are they, and how do fees play into this?
You definitely can have options. It usually depends on which patent office you used as your receiving office when you first filed the PCT application. So, while the USPTO can be the SS, applicants filing with the USPTO might also be eligible to choose other ISS. The materials list several big ones. The ETO, European Patent Office, KPO, Korean Intellectual Property Office, IP Australia, the Israel Patent Office, the Japan Patent Office, JPO, and Singapore's IP Office, IPOS.
So quite a few potential choices.
Depending on the circumstances, yes. The eligibility rules can be specific.
And does the USPTO only search for U.S. applicants?
No, actually. The ISS also has agreements to act as the ISA for applicants filing in certain other countries.
Yeah.
The source mentioned India, Brazil, Egypt, New Zealand as examples.
Interesting.
But that's provided the applications meet certain requirements, like language and subject matter. Not all ISS will search all types of inventions.
Right, and the cost.
Okay, fees. You have to pay the main international search fee. And crucially, this fee isn't fixed. It varies depending on which ISA you choose.
So the EPO fee might be different from the KPO fee, which might be different from the ISS fee.
Exactly. And these fees can also change because of currency exchange rates. You generally need to pay this fee within 1 month of filing your PCT application.
1 month. That's quick.
It is. And then, as we just discussed, if you get that lack of unity notice, any additional search fees for the extra inventions, those get paid directly to the ISA that's doing the work.
Got it. Main fee to the receiving office usually, additional fees directly to the ISA.
That's typically how it works. And because these fees and even some procedures can differ, the MPP materials strongly advise checking the details.
Where would you check?
The PCT Applicant's Guide is the main resource, or the USPTO's official gazette often has updates on fees and procedures relevant to the ISIS. You really need the latest info before deciding.
That makes perfect sense. Choosing the ISA, understanding the fees, potential extra costs for Unity. Big early decisions. Okay, so the ISA does its work, issues a report and opinion, deals with Unity. Now, here's where I think it gets really interesting. How does all this early stage work by the ISA actually connect to or influence the rest of the patent journey, like later in the international phase or even when you go national?
Yeah, this is where you see the foundation being laid. The ISA's work isn't done in a vacuum. It has significant downstream effects.
How so?
Well, first, that international search report. It's not just for the applicant's eyes. It gets published. So the public sees it, the patent offices in the countries you might later enter, the designating offices, see it, and importantly, if you opt for it, the International Preliminary Examining Authority, the IPEA, uses it as a starting point.
So that initial search really sets the baseline for everyone else looking at the application later.
Absolutely. It frames the discussion about the prior art and the written opinion. That's hugely valuable for the applicant's strategy.
Even though it's not binding.
Right? It's not binding on national offices. But it gives you, the applicant, a very early informed perspective from an examiner on the potential patentability issues based on the prior art found.
So you can use that to decide what?
Well, maybe you decide not to pursue the application in certain expensive countries if the opinion looks really negative. Or maybe you decide to file amendments and arguments during the optional Chapter 2 preliminary examination phase, trying to overcome the ISA's objections before you spend money entering multiple national phases.
Strategic decisions based on that early feedback. Makes sense.
And the ISA's work touches other parts of the application too, like sequence listings for biotech inventions. The ISA has rules about how those need to be submitted.
Okay.
If you don't provide it correctly, the ISA can actually charge a late fee. The source says potentially up to 25% of the international filing fee, which could be substantial.
Ouch. Okay, details matter.
They do. Even things like physical media for sequence listings, if allowed, need to be acceptable to both the receiving office and the ISA you chose. And the ISA might also need things like your priority document if it's not already available to them electronically. They can request it.
So they're checking formalities and requirements as well.
Yes. And thinking even further ahead,
Hmm.
the fact that your international application gets processed by an ISA and published under the PCT system, that publication itself can become prior art against other people's later applications.
Oh, so the publication date matters.
It definitely can. The source mentioned how, under the old U.S. law, the pre-AIA 102E date, which determines prior art effect, was tied to that PCT publication date if certain conditions were met.
Right.
And even seemingly administrative things later on, like calculating patent term adjustment in the U.S., that links back. The PTA calculation often starts from the date you formally enter the U.S. national stage, which follows the international phase.
Wow. Okay, it really is connected to everything that follows.
Yeah.
That initial ISA step casts a long shadow.
It really does. It's foundational.
So, boiling it down,
Right.
what does this all mean? For someone trying to navigate the PCT system, why is truly understanding the ISA's role so critical?
It's critical because, fundamentally, the ISA acts as the initial gatekeeper for assessing your invention against the world's prior art in the international phase. Their report and opinion are the first comprehensive feedback you get.
That first reality check, maybe?
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
Based on the readily searchable prior art, at least. So understanding their duties, that they search, they report, they check unity, they give an opinion is just baseline knowledge.
Right.
Then understanding the fee structure, especially the potential for those additional fees if lack of unity is raised, that's crucial for budgeting and planning your international strategy.
Definitely need to plan for that possibility.
And finally, knowing that you might have a choice of ISA and that different ISAs have different fees, maybe slightly different procedures, or even perceived strengths in certain technical areas that gives you a potential strategic advantage.
Choosing your IS wisely.
Exactly. The ISA's work provides the core information you need to make smarter decisions about protecting your invention internationally. It brings clarity, or at least initial clarity, to the prior art situation very early on.
That early clarity seems like the biggest benefit. In such a long and often complex process, knowing where you stand early must be invaluable.
It really is.
So, thinking about all this, for you, the listener, what really stands out? Is it the impact of that unity of invention concept and the potential costs? Is it the fact that you might get to choose between different ISAs like the USPTO, EPO, or KEPO? Or maybe how that initial written opinion can shape your entire strategy moving forward?
I think the core message is that the ISA performs this vital early investigation. Their search and report illuminate the known landscape surrounding your invention, and that information echoes through the whole patenting process.
Right. It sets the trajectory. And that leads perfectly into our final thought for you to ponder.
Right.
We know there are different ISAs, potentially with different strengths, fees, maybe even slightly different examination cultures. So, how might you, as an applicant, strategically choose your international searching authority? Not just based on cost, perhaps, but thinking about which ISA might best position your application for success when you eventually enter the national phase in your most important target countries. Something to think about.
A very practical strategic question.
Indeed. And just one final reminder, everyone, about our source material. This summary of the MPEP section was generated using AI tools.
So while helpful for discussion, it might have errors or omissions.
Exactly. It's for general information and education only. It is absolutely not legal advice.
Please consult the official MPP, a qualified instructor, or a registered patent practitioner for authoritative guidance.
Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive into MPP Section 1840.
We'll catch you on the next one.